I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the first informational meeting on the consideration of purchasing the Edgewood Bath and Tennis as an option to rebuilding the Valentine Pool. The idea of considering the Edgewood as an option came about because of the cost we were hearing of building a new pool. Let me give some history. The town was going to repair the pool with a military-grade liner system for around $300,000. This was expected to give the pool at least another 15 years. That's what the guarantee was. Once the pool repair started and was opened up, it was discovered that this option would not work. The pool was fixed enough to get 1 or 2 more years out of the pool. From there, a committee was formed to look at the good, better, or best cost of the pool to replace the pool in place. As estimates came in, the cost was surprising. I felt that obtaining an option on the Edgewood was a prudent thing to do. The Board of Selectmen agreed. I formed a task force committee of financial professionals, engineers, and people with the skills to analyze the cost of a pool at Valentine versus the cost of purchasing and running the Edgewood. I'm hoping that this presentation will go over what they found in both scenarios. Again, this is not the only meeting, but the first meeting. Questions will be answered, if not tonight, over the next week and at the next meeting on April 6th. With that, I will turn this over to Dan.
So just want to welcome everyone to the first informational meeting. We started to put together the task force, and Tom Marks will be presenting the information that we had all come together. After the presentation, we'll have questions, and we will try and get to as many questions as we can tonight. If not, we will certainly get to them during the week and on Monday's presentation as well. So if during this presentation you have any questions, please go on to southburyct.org/Edgewood and input your questions, and hopefully we'll get to them tonight. If not, we will get to them either during the week or on the Monday informational session. Thank you, Jeff. So with that, I guess we will turn it over to Tom Marks so he can give the presentation that we put together. Oh, sorry, George Bertram. Sorry, I'm going to turn it over to George Bertram now. Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can, George.
Yeah, I will say I'll apologize for the sound on Jeff. He was a little bit garbled coming through. So I think we need to do a sound check before anyone gets too far into their discussion.
So this is Jeff.
Meeting.
If you want to do a sound check, this is Jeff. Can you hear me, George?
I can hear you well now, but while you were talking, it was a little bit hard. It was a little bit like you were talking underwater. I don't know why, but this whole format is a little bit shaky when it comes to sound quality. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't.
Okay, go ahead and start.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead with the presentation, George.
Okay, we've got a number of people here that were part of the ad hoc pool task force that Jeff put together. We have Dan Colton. Dan is our finance director. Tom Connor. Tom is the vice chair of our board of finance. Charlie Rosa, who's been on the Park and Rec committee for, I think, 140 years. I think it's like 40 years. I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm making fun of you. Tom Marks, who is a commissioner on the Strategic Planning Commission. He's got a marketing background. He's not an elected officer in town, but he's worked very hard on this project. John Michaels will be on later. Unfortunately, he has a prior commitment until about 7:45. Hugh Sullivan is an architect in town. Bennett and Sullivan has done an awful lot of work in the area. As a matter of fact, correct me if I'm wrong, Hugh, but you did the design work on the pool and the pool house over at Edgewood.
That's correct.
So you're very qualified to talk about these issues. We have Jeff Manville. Everybody knows who he is. And I believe Jeff Tinley's on the call, our town attorney, but I haven't heard him say anything yet. Jeff, are you on the call? No. Okay. I'll give you a little description of how this meeting is going to work. And before I get into that, I would like to say that the town website has a link to many of the documents related to this presentation. Ray, if you could show folks how to get to that link, that would be great. So you go to the town, go ahead, you can talk, Ray.
So from the town website homepage, in the news section, informational meeting on Edgewood, you click that link. It comes to a description about the business and the meetings from tonight and next week. And then if you want to follow through on the documents, they're on this, documents can be found on this page here, southburyconnecticut.org, Edgewood.
You want to click it?
I did. And here's the
Okay.
materials that are up there.
I would bring your attention to the first document, the Edgewood Purchase Option FAQ. That has a fair amount of information that we've put together in a question and answer format that you might want to look at if you're interested in this topic. Okay. Tom Marks will give the main presentation. It has been reviewed and vetted by each member of our task force. The task force is aligned on the topics in pretty much in totality of what we're presenting and talking about here. We've had a lot of discussions about this back and forth. We didn't always agree on everything, but after a lot of it, a lot of discussion and back and forth, we did come to a consensus. The main presentation will be followed by a question and answer session. And I'd like to say that we're not just going to try to answer the frequently asked questions. We're going to try to answer all the questions as best we can. If you make comments, well, we might not be able to answer those, but if you do ask a question, we'll do our best to answer every single question we receive. Some questions have already been submitted, and we have collected those, and we'll try to answer some of those tonight. If you do wish to submit a question or comment during or after this meeting, please use the link on the town website. Ray, maybe you could show us that link. Thank you.
It's right at the bottom of the page where all the documents are. Fill in the first name, last name, address, email address, and comments. That when you hit submit, that will send an email to Dan Colton. Dan will synthesize the question and the comments and make it available for us to present on the screen and answer.
Please, if you do submit a link, include your name and address. That's pretty standard in a public meeting. If you do get up to speak, we do ask that you provide that information before you start. I don't expect we'll answer every question at tonight's meeting. We'll do the best we can. Any items left over will be covered at the April 6th meeting, which will be a similar format. We'll have an online Teams type meeting, and it will start at 7 o'clock. I guess I'm not sure quite how to do it, but if you don't want to use the link on the website, are there other ways, Ray, people can submit questions? I know we've gotten some in writing. We've gotten some in email. Is there another preferred format besides that link on the site?
I think you can send an email to Dan Colton, Finance Director at southbury-ct.gov. He's been collecting the comments. That's probably the best way. Selectman's office is another way.
Okay, so if you send an email into somebody in town hall, we'll try to get it factored into the system here. During this meeting, we won't mention your name or your address or any personal information. However, if you do submit a question or a comment, we will include your name on a document that we'll publish at some point after the meeting, where we publish all the questions in a written format. As I mentioned before, we will hold a second meeting on April 6th at 7 p.m. We'll try to answer all the remaining questions if we don't get to them tonight at that meeting. On April 8th, the pool task force will meet to make a formal recommendation to the town, and that'll be after consideration of any comments and feedback we get from these meetings, which is obviously important. Public feedback is vital to the process of running the town. On April 13th, there will be a joint Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen meeting to decide on the next steps. The BOF may approve the acquisition at that meeting. If they do, funding will go into the budget. However, that doesn't mean we will proceed with an acquisition at that point. The Board of Selectmen will have to agree to exercise the option, and that could happen or not happen anytime before July 31st, at which time the option will expire. So I'm done. I'll turn it over to you, Tom, and away you go.
Before Tom starts, could I just let everybody know that when you go to speak, you should be speaking your name first so that people understand who's making the comments.
Okay, this is Tom Marks doing a mic check. Can everyone hear me?
Sounds good, Tom.
Sounds
Yes.
good.
Yes, can hear you. I can hear you, Tom.
Who can't hear me? Someone text me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great.
Yeah, I can hear you, Tom. Can you hear me?
I can hear everybody. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for this. I guess I want to start by just acknowledging that this is the task force understands this is a strange time to be talking about a pool. Frankly, it's a strange time to be talking about a lot of things, but I want to appreciate everyone for coming out tonight under these circumstances and tuning in. And I also want to just let everybody know that we are going to try to fumble through a couple technology things. I want to thank you in advance for your understanding as we try to make this as painless as possible given the circumstances. So thank you for that. So the work that I'm presenting tonight, this is work done by the ad hoc task force. We didn't have our first meeting, I think, till February 6th. So this was all work that's been compiled within 6 weeks, but we've gotten a tremendous amount done during that time. So I'm looking forward to running through a lot of that tonight. If we go to the next slide, right? We start with the situation that we're in. And Jeff went over a lot of this, but since there was maybe some audio troubles, I'll reiterate. The long and the short of it is Ballantine Pool is reaching the end of its lifespan. We have at least one, maybe 2 seasons before we get into some very costly structural repairs. As we were looking into what these repairs would require, the Edgewood property became available, and we started investigating that. We'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but during the course of our due diligence, one of the major things we discovered was that the pool house is going to require significant upgrades to meet state building codes and ADA compliance. So that's going to increase the cost of any work we do at the Ballantine Pool. Finally, we arrive when Jeff put this ad hoc task force together to weigh the repair replacement cost of Ballantine versus the purchase of Edgewood as a new town pool. So we have the task force members listed here on the side. George introduced a lot of us. I would add that the task force also worked closely with Jeff, with John Michaels on the Board of Finance, and also Hugh Sullivan, an architect here in town who's also joined us for the call tonight, so he can answer any questions. So when Jeff put together this task force, he challenged us to look at 4 specific questions. Is this purchase an appropriate option to replace the current town pool? Does the financial impact justify the purchase? Recommend any engineering studies and inspections as to determine the condition of the Edgewood facility. And finally, suggest any additional actions as necessary to achieve through due diligence. So it was within that framework that the task force operated the past couple of weeks, collecting data, trying to make heads and tails of this comparison. Go ahead, Ray.
Sorry.
That's okay. So as we started to collect all the data points, we started to bundle them in 5 buckets. So these are the top 5 considerations that we're going to use as a framework for our research. The first, we're going to get into just what's going on at the Ballantine pool, the deterioration of Ballantine. Number 2, we're going to look at the facilities at Edgewood. Number 3, we'll take a closer look at the populations that are served by the town pool. Number 4, we'll get into the financial impact, specifically no tax increases or bonding required. And then 5, as a final consideration, the impact of not purchasing Edgewood. So when we start with the condition of the Ballantine pool, as Jeff mentioned, the pool is suffering. It's 50 years old, and we know it has 1, potentially 2 seasons remaining. Without getting too technical, because I'd probably botch it anyway, but it's our understanding that the gutter system that surrounds the pool, over time, over 50 years, considering the materials that it was built with 50 years ago, has slowly began leaking, and that water has seeped down further than I think any of us had expected, where it started to deteriorate the condition of the concrete, started to rust the steel support frame of the pool, and because of all of that, as opposed to, as Jeff was saying, maybe some more simple and less costly fixes, it's going to require significant reconstruction. In addition, Ballantine has a couple of other issues. The parking is very tight at Ballantine. If anyone's been there for a swim meet, you're aware of that. We do have some security concerns with access control in the clubhouse, making sure, when there are children in the pool, making sure we have a close eye on who's entering and exiting that pool house. There are concerns with that right now. And finally, the pool house and the pool do not currently meet ADA requirements. That includes having working lift chairs. The pool has lift chairs, but they're not operational at the moment. And the pool does not have a sloped entry ramp. Additionally, as mentioned, as we started digging, we were told by the state that any major work that we do at the pool is going to require a necessary upgrade of the bathhouse. We would be required to bring it up to full ADA accessibility and compliance. This would require us to expand the footprint almost by a factor of 2. The current pool house stands at 1,640 square feet. We would need approximately 3,000 square feet. And that is to ensure that all the passageways in the pool house are the proper width so people can navigate them. It requires additional plumbing facilities. There would be storage requirements. If we get a question on it, I'm sure Hugh can go into more detail about what exactly is required, but it's going to require a significant more amount of space than we currently have. A larger septic system would have to be installed to account for all the new plumbing fixtures we'd have to put in. And currently we have 3 handicap accessible spots in front of the pool house, but none of them are van accessible. So we'd look to increase handicap accessibility of the pool house as well. So as we started digging around and asking experts, our first goal was to get a handle on what is the true cost of repairing or replacing Ballantine. And that is a harder question to answer than you might think. We talked to a number of experts, and you'll see some of them on this slide. Scott Pools, the company that built the original Ballantine pool back in 1972, was brought in for a consultation. J&J Pools, our engineering firm, Weston and Sampson, who the town has used on a number of projects. Bill Drakely of Drakely Pools, and also leadership at the Greater Waterbury YMCA. They know a lot about pools, so we thought their insight would be helpful. As we asked around with these experts, we asked a few of them to provide us with estimates, not a formal bid process, of course, but just give us an estimate of what you think it would cost to replace this pool as is. And we had a high variance of answers. So what that required us to do was find someone who could be an independent arbiter, who could look at all these numbers and make sense of them and say, you know what, I think it's really going to cost you this. So this is where Hugh Sullivan comes in, of Bennett Sullivan Associates. We worked with Hugh to be that independent arbiter, to take a look at all of the numbers we were getting in, and also apply his expertise to the bathhouse side of this equation. he would know better than anyone else, or his office, I should say, knows better than anyone else about ADA compliance and accessibility. And he was able to give us some guidance on what it would take to meet those state regulations. So after Hugh and his firm had a chance to pore over all the data we've collected, this is what they have outlined as the true cost of replacing Ballantyne Pool. The pool in and of itself, including the actual concrete structure, but the decking that goes around it, all the electrical work, all the lighting, all the costs associated with the pool, run about $2.5 million. Revisions to the bathhouse, remember we're expanding this by almost twice as much. We're looking at $825,000. And then there's site work, and we've talked about this a little bit with the handicap parking and increasing parking, but also new septic, landscaping, everything that would have to be done in and around the site would be an additional $300,000, which gives us that grand total there, $3.729 million to replace the Ballantyne Pool on that current site. Now that also includes about $250,000 of contingency, but as we all know, anyone who's done a home renovation, once you get into it, the costs just keep going up. They only go one way, right? So we try.
Hey, Tom, let me interrupt you for 1 second. Your voice is fading out. You're starting to sound a little like Jeff.
Okay.
Whoa. Don't know.
How's that?
That's much better.
Is that better? Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm walking. You can't see this, but I'm walking around the room holding a microphone, so I must have looked the wrong way. Sorry. I'll try to be more still. If we go to the next slide, Ray. I want to address uncertainty because while we're very confident about the town's ability to bring in a project on or close to budget, there is some uncertainty baked into this situation. First, we can only go off present day costs. But as everyone knows, the cheapest time to build something is today, right? Because costs only go up. Material costs only go up. So depending on when a Ballantyne project would be approved, we would probably have to get a new set of quotes in that are likely to be higher than what we've already received. This is also based on present day code. Every year the code book only gets bigger. They don't take regulations out, they keep adding them. I mentioned the cost variance, and that is the one area with regard to the construction of the pool that we have some continued uncertainty. While we believe in the Bennett and Sullivan analysis, especially the pool house, the range of costs that we receive back in the pool doesn't make us feel incredibly confident, right? Because the numbers were all over the place. The final thing is the loss of a season. Depending on when this project begins, we're looking at the town being without a pool for most likely one summer, possibly two, depending on how the construction schedule plays out. Very briefly, for those of you who just had a hard swallow after seeing that cost of $3.7 million, we thought it would be helpful to show a couple of comparable town pool projects. These are not apples to apples comparisons, but these are a couple of municipal pool projects to put out there as a point of comparison. So let's start with Greenwich. Now, I understand we don't live in Greenwich. I understand Ballantyne is not on the ocean as this site is, and this is a larger pool. So again, not an apples-to-apples comparison, but this was nearly a $10 million project in Greenwich. If we go to the next slide, Ray. This is one that's near completion in Wallingford, Connecticut. Again, a larger pool than ours. This is a $5.5 million project. This project is very much stripped down from where they began. This originally had a playground off to the side. It had sports fields included in the complex. And the cost was just getting astronomical, and the town continued to cut back. And I believe they're going to have a very nice project, but it's a couple of steps down from where they started because, again, these projects are very expensive. The final one we'll bring up for consideration is Hamilton Park in Waterbury. And some may have seen this reported on in the Republican American. There was a number quoted in that article from Mayor O'Neill of about $1.5 million to replace that pool. So if you can take a look at that pool, that's That pool is smaller, significantly smaller than the pool at Ballantyne, with a few less features. And that project, they're looking at a $1.5 million cost to replace. So that hopefully gives you some frame of reference for what a municipal pool project would look like. We're going to move on to our second bucket of considerations, which is looking at the premium pool facility at Edgewood. And this is kind of a few slides, a tail of the tape, on how Ballantyne compares with the facilities at Edgewood. There's some similarities, but there are some major differences that are important to highlight. The pools are relatively similar in square footage. Edgewood is 7 to 8% larger than the Ballantyne pool. Notably, Edgewood's 6 swim lanes are measured in yards. Ballantyne is measured in meters. With regard to the season that both pools are open, the town pool runs on a Memorial Day to Labor Day schedule. Edgewood opens 2 weeks earlier and closes 2 weeks later because the pool has heaters. Ballantyne does not have heaters, and Edgewood has actually heaters that have just been or in the process of being replaced for this upcoming season. Parking spaces is a major consideration. As mentioned, Ballantyne only has 62. Edgewood has 159 parking spaces. A major point of difference is the decking that surrounds the pool. We saw a comment earlier about concern about the decking around Edgewood. Ballantyne has about 6,400 square feet of decking. Edgewood has about 2.5 times that amount of concrete around it. So this is critical for pool chairs, tables, umbrellas. Now that number 14,250, that includes an adjacent patio that's right outside the pool fencing, but it's essentially adjacent to the swimming pool. So there's tremendous amounts of space available at Edgewood that we just don't have at Ballantyne, unless you go back into that grassy area, the grassy hill area, or you go outside the fencing. And then finally, the pool house. There's a very nice pool house facility at Edgewood that is over 5,000 square feet, whereas Ballantyne, again, is about 1,600 square feet. But here's where you get into some features that Edgewood offers that we just don't have available at Ballantyne. The fact that the lighting is modern and functional. Ballantyne has lighting in the pool and around the pool, but it's all currently non-functioning. And if we want to get it working again, it's not code compliant. It would all need to be redone. The Edgewood pool is heated. The Edgewood pool has water features for kids to play under, or kids at heart to play under. It has a zero entry, sloped entry into the pool. And if you haven't seen this, it's a really neat feature. Instead of having to jump into the deep end or walk down a flight of stairs or a ladder, it's what sometimes is referred to as a beach entry, where you can just walk in on a gradual slope. This is especially nice for ADA compliance and also our senior populations, as they can kind of ease into the water. Both the pool and the facility, the bathhouse, are ADA compliant, which, as mentioned previously, Ballantyne is not. But what I think is really exciting about Edgewood is it's not just about the pool. The fact that there are 6 USTA grade tennis courts on campus is an important point that we'll bring up later. There are 2 paddle tennis courts. There's a regulation basketball court. There's a 3,500 square foot area with a nice modern playground equipment. They have a beach volleyball court. They have a commercial kitchen with a liquor license, so a snack bar. And there's an 800 square foot gym space with fitness equipment in it. So it is more than just the swimming pool. So let's get into how some of those facilities actually serve our population. Because right off the bat, when we think about Ballantyne Pool, we think about summer swim families. We think about people who maybe get a summer pool pass, or they'll get a day pass, and they'll use the pool as a way to cool off and relax. And that is certainly a population that is robust and we want to continue to serve. But there's a lot of other parts of the population that we hit that aren't accounted for in those numbers. For example, senior swimmers. Currently at Ballantyne, the pool does not cater to senior swimmers. There's no working lift. There's no zero entry. It's not fully ADA compliant. This is Edgewood could be a much friendlier facility for seniors, and I think there's already been some initial conversation with senior services in town about how they might be able to utilize a facility like this.
Hey, Tom, hate
Yes,
to interrupt you, but you're starting to fade out voice-wise again.
I think it's hit my lips. Oh no! Sterilize this microphone. All right. The last bucket here. The Shark swim team. We have a very competitive swim program in town, a very successful program. And in the summer, this team competes in the Valentine pool. It's really a year-long program, but in the summer, all of these swimmers compete at Valentine. So the fact that we have a 6-lane competition pool for them to utilize for their meets and also for their training is a big plus. Another key consideration here is our Parks and Rec summer camp, which on any given week can have 125 plus campers. There's a tremendous opportunity if we're able to work with the Edgewood property of having that camp take place possibly at Longmeadow and then having the kids use the pool across the street. Currently, we try to get a facility for the kids, a school facility. We work with Region 15, and then those kids will get on a bus, and that bus will take them over to Valentine. So it would sure be nice to spare those summer campers the hot bus ride and let them utilize that facility. This next point we're going to get into more as we go on, but the Pomperaug High School tennis team currently does not have home courts at the high school. Those courts are not playable in their current condition. For the last couple of seasons, the tennis team has rented the courts from Edgewood. So this would eliminate what we've received a quote on as a $1 million court reconstruction project at the high school. Being able to use the Edgewood courts further on, we wouldn't have to tackle or consider that project. Not to mention recreational tennis and pickleball. I don't believe we have any public pickleball courts in town currently. And that's the sport everyone says, no one's played it, but everyone says it's the fastest growing sport. So having pickleball courts that the residents could use would be a major plus, as well as extra recreational tennis courts. Beginner swim lessons. Us on the task force believe that swimming is a critical skill, and having a place for children to learn how to swim is a critical component of a town. Having a recreational basketball court. Anyone who's driven by Community House on a warm day where we're not quarantined, you've seen those courts get plenty of use. Having another facility that's as nice, and actually a lot nicer than what we have at Community House, would be a great addition to the town. We also have the 2 paddle tennis courts, which is a year-round sport. And these are the only paddle tennis courts in the immediate area. So that's not to say that paddle tennis is a very popular sport. I understand that, but for those who play, there's not a lot of options. So it would be great to have a resource in town.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
Your voice just keeps drifting further away. I don't know what is going on with all the sound, but you were really doing great sound-wise, and then it just seems like we're losing it somehow. I don't know why, but I'm just saying it's drifting away.
I'm going to sit down. I'm going to have Jeff put me in a headlock so I don't move my my mouth from in front of the mic. Well, actually, at this point, to go through some of the financial highlights, I'd like to pass it off to Tom Connor, Vice Chair on the Board of Finance. And Tom, maybe you could take us through some of these financial considerations.
Yeah. So we, in the town of Southbury has been pretty frugal in terms of how it's managed financially, including various capital charges for these sorts of things. So as a result of that, the purchase would not require any tax increase or new bonding to do it. I guess the main point there, though, is that's been made a little bit, is that one way or another, if we go down the road of Ballantyne, or we go down the road of Edgewood, there's a significant cost involved. But we've been trying to have sufficient funds there to deal with that. But I think overall, if we stay in the pool, business in Southbury, that it's going to cost us less to do Edgewater than it is going to cost us to redo Ballantyne. The second point there is that that we believe that we can do a self-sustaining operating model. So right now it's costing us approximately $90,000 a year to run Ballantyne. We believe at Edgewood, based on our financial analysis of the current owner's books, that we could potentially run that with no net cost to the town. So we would also get a bit of an uplift in terms of the carry cost on running Edgewood. In terms of long-term maintenance, I think that that we've taken all that into effect, and we think the capital costs and the long-term maintenance costs would be similar or better for Edgewood versus Ballantyne. And now the financial model that we've assumed would include a fee increase to a target of $350 versus the proposed upcoming $320 for Ballantyne. But at the same time, I think we've accentuated the fact that there's a lot more facilities at Edgewood than there is at Ballantyne. So I think the overall financial argument really, and the discussion really, is about whether you want to continue the pool concept in Southbury, because if you do want to continue the pool concept in Southbury, we think it's a better economic proposition to do it at Edgewood than to do it at Ballantyne over time.
Good. Thank you, Tom.
So, yep.
So the final bucket we want to take a look at here is the impact of not purchasing Edgewood. If we were to pass on the Edgewood property, the town should be aware of the following considerations. The first, will another municipality purchase the property? Now, we have been told that another municipality that borders Middlebury is interested if the property becomes available. And we've also been told that there is a second backup bid. There's a second backup bid that is already in pocket. So from an opportunity standpoint, this is an opportunity that, if that information is correct, will not be on the table forever. Should we choose to pass, it's one less option to solve other problems that will eventually have to be dealt with down the road. Second consideration, will the new buyer be sensitive to our elementary school right across the street? This North Benson Road is right across from Longmeadow Elementary School. Currently, the Edgewood parking lot is used as overflow parking when there are events at the school. We want to make sure whoever has that property is accommodating to our school system and considerate of the fact that there are students right across the street. Finally, can we find an alternative site for the PHS tennis teams? As mentioned earlier, the court replacement estimate at Pomperaug High School is approximately $1 million. And if we go to the next slide, if you're watching at home, this photo probably isn't doing justice the current condition of the Pomperaug High tennis courts. They're bad. They would not hold muster as parking lots, let alone tennis courts right now. They are unplayable. which is why the team has been playing at Edgewood for the last couple of seasons. So we do have a quote in hand to repair these. It's $1 million project. And given our budget sharing as part of Region 15, we would be responsible for 67% of that cost should the tennis courts be replaced. Region 15 currently rents the courts from the Edgewood property. If the town were to take control of Edgewood, Region 15 has already said that they would continue to rent the courts from the town of Southbury. And we've also heard from other schools in the area, high schools and colleges, who would have interest in renting these courts because that's the quality of court that they are. They're better than any other public facilities that we would have. So there is an opportunity, and we factored this into our financial model, to generate revenue from the tennis courts as well. There's some concern about Edgewood being in Middlebury, and we understand that. Dan Colton had interns working in the finance office recently, and to address this concern, he asked them to plot 30 random addresses from all over the borders of Southbury. So all of those gold pinpoints with the stars in them, those each represent one of the 30 addresses that we plot on a map. The green flag in the middle by the Route 6 sign, that is the location, there's a pointer if you can see it, that is the location of Ballantyne. If you travel east, right over the border, that's where we are in Middlebury. And I think that highlights an interesting point that we need to make. Yes, the property is in Middlebury. It's barely in Middlebury. It's a little bit over half a mile into Middlebury. However, if you were to take each of these, again, randomly selected 30 addresses, and you Google map the driving distance to Ballantyne versus the driving distance to Edgewood, on average, you get a difference of 4 minutes and 22 seconds longer driving to Edgewood than to Ballantyne. For some people, obviously, it's going to be shorter to have a town pool at Edgewood than it would be at Ballantyne. But on average, you're looking at just under 4.5 minutes of additional drive time for the addresses that we plotted. At this point, we want to talk about some of the goals that we would have should the town move forward with Edgewood. And those are making sure we maintain the property in peak condition. It's a wonderfully maintained facility. The current owner does an excellent job, is incredibly diligent about having cleaning staff in, making sure it's sanitary and always looking its best. And if we were to acquire this property, Jeff has said as much in our meetings, his main goal would be to maintain the property in peak condition. We want to maintain existing programming. If you're currently an Edgewood member, as much of that programming as we can continue to keep in place, we're looking to do so. Additionally, as much of the programming as we have at Ballantyne, we want to keep in place. Obviously, there will be some overlap. But if you're currently enjoying a program at one of these two pools, our goal is to make sure it stays in place. It's very important that we keep fees affordable and sustainable. It was mentioned earlier, the target in the early financial projections right now for Southbury families would be $350 for a season pool pass. And that's up $30 from where we are at Ballantyne. And it's arguably a much nicer facility. And finally, we would want to consider options for future improvement. And if you go to the next slide, Ray, we can talk more about that. The property is a little over 10 acres. However, the property that has not currently been developed, if you can see off to the right-hand side, that gray strip on the right-hand side is all marked as wetlands. So it hasn't been developed because it can't be developed unless we do some remediation. But there's a lot in the footprint that is available to us. And that doesn't mean that there isn't room to expand within the current footprint as well. If you look at the pool house, which is, I'd love to point, but you're not going to be able to see me. I can't jump that high. It's to the left. That's the pool right there. That square is the pool house.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, George.
Tom. You're fading out again.
Okay. Like too close or too far?
You have to stick that microphone right in your face, I guess. I don't know what the deal is, but
Okay. Is that better? All right.
Perfect.
To the left, I'm not going to move. To the left of the pool house, in this drawing, there is some parking space where you could potentially double the size of that structure. There are parking lot spaces that you could reclaim as part of an additional structure. You can take that basketball court that is in the upper right-hand corner, and you can consider enclosing that and making that a field house or a gymnasium. So there are options on the property. None of them have been more than passing discussions at the moment on the task force. We've been looking at other pieces more diligently, but it's something we could and would like to explore. Next slide, Ray. I would also like to address those that have advocated for a regional community center and point out that given the location of Edgewood, it would be a prime area for a regional community center. That circle represents a 5-mile radius. You can see in the top right corner, that's the Waterbury Y, the Naugatuck Y below that, and over in the bottom left is the Newtown Community Center. So none of those approach a 5-mile radius in and around Edgewood. And there's an opportunity to work with towns like Middlebury, Woodbury, even Roxbury, Oxford for sure. So if that's an option we want to explore in the future, Edgewood is in prime position to do so. I want to recap again some of the dates that George mentioned earlier. April 1st is today, and we are doing this presentation. We will also be doing a follow-up presentation on the 6th to answer more of the questions that have been coming in. And if you hear the phones going off, we're all getting alerts. I know questions are coming in. We might not get to them all this evening. Those that we don't get to, we'll address on April 6th. On April 8th, the task force will formally submit a report. On April 13th, there's a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to consider our Edgewood recommendation. On July 31st, that is when our option to purchase Edgewood expires. So if we don't take action on the 31st, come August 1st, the property is back on the market and free to be sold to whoever they see fit. We have 120 days to close on the property from the option date exercise. So let's say we activate the option in the affirmative on July 31st. The town would take control of the property 120 days from that date. And finally, some clarity about what we project to be the total cost summary of Edgewood. The purchase price, as reported, is $2 million. The town is figuring about $40,000 in closing costs to complete the transaction. The town would also earmark $50,000 to do a fresh resurfacing on the tennis courts and the basketball court. And we would like to factor in a $25,000 contingency, which would put the total cost at $2,115,000. So we're now in the part of this process where we're actively seeking input from the town, but it's only fair, I think, to disclose that at this point, and as George mentioned, the task force to a man is all aligned in this opinion. As of right now, we believe that Edgewood Bath and Tennis Club is a fiscally responsible and appropriate option to replace the current town pool at Ballantyne. As such, we will recommend exercising the town's option to purchase with the following provisions. The task force would like to remain in place to explore and recommend facility management options. We believe strongly that the facility should not be managed by the town unless we create certain departments or controls for managing. But we're also going to look at private management companies as well. Again, we want to maintain the peak condition of the facility. Another condition, we are asking the town to obtain a pool inspection report, but we can only do that once the pool is open for the season.
We've done significant due diligence already on the conditions, speaking with the builder and a state expert, Bill Drakely. We've walked the property with him. We've gotten some strong assurances from him that the pool is in fantastic condition. However, we do want to obtain an inspection report, and we can only do that when the pool is open. Our final condition is that the task force remain in place to explore community center options as well as site improvements. As mentioned at the top of this meeting, there's a website up currently, and there's a number of resources that we turned up in the course of our due diligence, including now this presentation. So if you need to go back, if I moved away from the mic and you didn't see something or hear something, feel free to leaf back through this. And that brings a close to my part of this presentation. If you have questions, you can submit them to the form at the website listed on the screen right now. And I suppose I will turn it back over to you, George.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That was a lot of hard work you did there. At this point, we're going to open or try to open it up to questions. A number have been submitted online. I don't know, Dan, are you ready to put any of those forward?
Yeah, George, we're ready to put some of them forward. We may not get to all of them tonight, but we'll get to as many as we can.
Okay. If the new estimates to repair Ballantyne Pool are around $1 million, why is the town still pushing to purchase Edgewood? Makes no sense to me. I'll ask Hugh Sullivan to tone in on this because I don't think we ever saw an estimate for a pool that was $1 million.
Yeah, that's correct. We never have.
I mean, the estimates that you've come up with, maybe you could describe some of your thought process on that a little bit, on what you came up with about 2.7.
Well, with the West and Sampson reviews of the pool, you know, the repairs are from the continuous drain and edge, and they're quite deep. It's just not like they're 12 inches. They're almost 3-4 feet in depth. So I haven't to date seen a pool for $1 million to repair. I don't know where that number came from.
George, if I could.
Go ahead, Dan.
This is Jeff Manville. I think.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. One of the things you have to understand is not just the cost of rebuilding just the pool. What happened, it not only was the pool cost, but it also force us into the bathhouse reconstruction, which adds to the number significantly.
That's correct.
Next question.
So the second part of that question, can we go back to that question again? Because it was kind of two questions in one. If we're going to continue to have a town pool, let's keep the pool in Southbury. I'll say something about this, and then I'll ask some other people for comments. Right now, we have a Region 15, which includes Middlebury. We have a school system that's joined, has been like that for 50 years with the town of Middlebury. 67%, it used to be 70% of our tax dollars go to Region 15. So essentially, we're already regionalized. I would love to see the pool in Southbury. Unfortunately, Edgewood and its facilities are not located in Southbury. They are very close, and they are very close to a couple of our schools, literally across the street from Longmeadow, our newest elementary school, and not far from Pomperog High School. So I've heard people say, oh, let's keep it in Southbury, but we haven't really had, we've been joined with Region 15 for so long. I mean, we're just a region. So I'm not sure I understand where that sentiment comes from. It's almost a denial of the fact that we're regionalized with Middlebury already. Does anybody else on the team have a comment on this?
George, this is Jeff Manville. I've been looking. We've been discussing regional locations for regional community centers, possibilities. What can we work on? The problem all along for a regional community center, if it was ever going to be done, and they've been working on this since like 1923, the location of a piece of property in a location that would be acceptable for a regional community center, the real estate, that location just does not exist. So by having a location like this, if there was to be a discussion about expanding for a regional community center, the fact that it's just outside of Southbury and the strategic location between Woodbury, Oxford, Middlebury, and Southbury would lend itself to further consider the location. So it's actually optimal location if we were to down the road regional community center with other municipalities, if that was to be what we were looking to do. If we don't do that, there's no physical property located in Southbury or near to Southbury that would be acceptable for a regional community center.
Thank you, Jeff. John Michaels, do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
The sentiment of having it in Southbury is a wonderful thing. I'd love to have it in Southbury, but Jeff makes the point that there's no physical property. We know that to fix the existing pool and keep the in the existing location and keep the pool house and get a pool house that is commensurate with building code and ADA, according to Smith and Wesson, or that's the gun people, whoever those people were, the engineers. It's going to cost. Yes, thank you. It's going to cost millions to do it, whereas going to Edgewood is a much less expensive option. So while it's regrettable we can't do it in Southbury, we already are a region. We're trying to look for some way to have there is no place to do this in Southbury. And 3, we're trying to look for an opportunity for a regional community center, and this offers that opportunity. So I'd love to have it in Southbury, but there are too many arguments that it really doesn't make sense there. Thank you.
This is Tom chiming in again, and I want to reiterate one thing, or maybe boil it down to its clearest form. All the experts that we spoke to, and Hugh, I'd invite you to contradict me if you feel this is inaccurate. No one was able to tell us with confidence that we could replace what we currently have at Ballantyne for the cost it would take to acquire Edgewood, which is $2 million, let alone what we would have at Edgewood, so the expanded facilities. But just to replace what we have at Ballantyne, there is zero confidence that that is available to us at the acquisition cost of Edgewood.
That's correct.
And the repair, even more importantly, to the direct point of this question, the repair is significantly more, to repair the pool and everything that would go with that is significantly more than purchasing Edgewood. Thank you. Next question, I guess.
Okay, next question. The estimates for rebuilding at Ballantyne Park does not appear to be based on competitive bids. Why has the town decided to proceed without competitive bids on rebuilding the site? If not, why is this exception being made to the purchasing policy? I'll make the first comment on this, in that to actually get bids, you'd have to have a design. You'd have to pay money, probably a lot of money, to have people do up a design to draw everything up. And so we actually don't have bids. What we have are estimates. hopefully good faith estimates, although there's some questions there. So we don't really have bids. So we haven't really gone through the purchasing policy, if you want to look at it that way. Hugh, you want to say anything about this comment?
Well, it's a way that you put 5, 6 groups of people together to look at the project, and they came up with their own ideas for costs. It isn't a project that where design professionals like surveyors and engineers, architects, pool contractors have been asked to design a project so they could get contract documents. And if you were to go ahead and do that and get contract documents, then you would set the project out to bid, and you'd have to comply with the town criteria for their purchasing policy. But this is just due diligence that's been done, and I believe it's been done quite effectively for these the look at the existing Ballantyne as well as at the Edgewood land parcel.
This is Michaels. George?
Go ahead, John.
I was involved in the building of the town hall, the refurbishing of all the town buildings back when we did that. Also involved with the financing and building of the library. What did we do then? Because that sets precedent for maybe what we do here. What we did then was we hired experts like architects like Bennett and Sullivan. We hired engineers to tell us what does it cost to do this project. And we found out what the experts told us it would be, and then we established a parameter about what we were willing to spend for the cost to do those projects. Then we did plans and specs, and we did bidding, and both times the projects came out more than the experts said, which Hugh will probably tell you is not an unfamiliar outcome. And we pared the projects back and to fit in a budget that we had made. So the process for the town in the past has to use experts and then use bidding at the last to actually finish to bring it home. Second, as to the purchasing policy, this is not a purchasing policy matter. This is to determine a price. The Board of Selectmen, though, when they vote to accept the option, will certainly by definition waive the purchasing policy, but you can't have competitive bidding for purchasing a piece of real estate. I think it works the opposite. So a purchasing policy doesn't apply to this kind of expenditure. Thank you.
Anyone else have a comment? I just want to say again that we didn't want to spend a lot of money on design documents. It would have been very expensive. So to get real bids, we would have had to do that. And this was just really an exercise to try to determine if it made sense to rebuild Ballantyne. And based on our estimates and the cost, comparing those estimates with the cost of purchasing Edgewood outright, it didn't make any sense for us to proceed with the design process and spend a lot of money on that. So, okay. So I guess we're going to the next question unless anyone else has a comment. Where is the money coming from to pay the annual taxes and other fees to the town of Middlebury without raising our taxes? I'll turn that over to Dan if you want to take a crack at that one.
Yeah, what we had done with our fiscal analysis to the Board of Finance was we included in that analysis was the real estate taxes to the town of Middlebury. And if we take just the analysis that we put in, given that we would consider running this facility at a slight profit, that all the revenue that would generate in would pay the annual taxes without having to take any tax money from the taxpayers of Southbury to run the facility. And Ballantyne Park, we try and run all of our park and rec and senior service centers cost neutral, but the pool has always been running at a loss. It's just the the way that the amount of people that sign up to swim at Ballantyne just does not cover the operating expenses to run the facility.
Anyone else want to chime in on that question?
This is Jeff Manville. That's correct. That was all worked into the cost analysis with paying those taxes, which kind of ties into the second question: why is Ballantyne Park running at a loss? So the Ballantyne pool facility is just a pool facility. There's no other amendments there that brings in revenue. So that's understandable. If we just ran a pool at, let's say, Edgewood, it was just run, and we didn't have the rest of the facility to an income from the rest of the programs that were going to be run, it would be correct. But because this is an expanded facility and the way it operates, we expect not to have that loss that we do in Ballantyne.
I think another factor at Ballantyne has been the lifeguard situation, where we've been overhiring lifeguards based on our research, but we can maybe talk about that in another question.
I think Michael's here, I think there's a fundamental issue that we need to emphasize. The Edgewood property currently operates with a revenue stream of over $400,000. And we will, our plan, and it certainly seems reasonable to the people who did the fiscal impact, is that the vast majority of that will continue with revenues from a variety of places. Southbury's revenue for running its pool is less than half of that. The Southbury pool for decades, from my experience, for decades, is the only program we run that runs at a deficit. The only one. All the others are break even. The taxpayers have been willing to run a $100,000 to $90,000 deficit every year to support a pool in town. No one's complained that I know of in the last few years anyway. Ballantyne runs at a loss because the selectmen decided not to raise the fees for the participant to a level that would make the pool break even. If we had 110 permanent memberships and 1,000 day memberships, you'd have to maybe double. You have to double our revenues, the costs, in order to make it break even. And I think the selectmen have, and certainly the Board of Finance has agreed tacitly anyway, that we think the town has an obligation to have this for everybody's use, and we're not going to force only the users to pay for it. So that's why it's been running at a loss. And why with Edgewood, it will not run as a loss. It'll break even or do better because they have several income streams from all sorts of programs, tennis, etc. Thank you.
And John, you're correct in that assumption that for us to break even at the Ballantyne, we'd have to charge 2.5 times what we charge now.
Dan, do you want to discuss the lifeguard situation at all? I know that question's probably in another question somewhere, but I thought maybe it'd be a good time to delve into that a little bit because people have been asking about it.
I think, George, we could probably pick that up when we get to the other question.
Okay.
Before we move off that one, or as we move off that one, I would just say whoever is interested in delving into the revenue streams, we've referenced that financial impact analysis that Dan Colton's office did, and he made an excellent presentation on February 10th, and there's a video recording of that presentation. So if you're very interested in having him walk you through that spreadsheet, that's an excellent watch, and you could learn a lot about how the town is projecting the revenue.
I believe Dan's projections were conservative on the low side. intentionally. And even with those conservative estimates, the revenue stream looked positive. Okay, the next question. Has the task force received guidance about the ability to operate any pool this coming season? We hear that pools will not open. Isn't this another reason to ask current seller for extension of the option? Well, if we did acquire Edgewood, we wouldn't acquire it until the end of 2020, sometime in November, if everything went according to the schedule we've laid out and we approved the acquisition. It wouldn't happen until probably in November. So there wouldn't be a question about this season. It would be the next season. And I would assume that the coronavirus issue would be under control by then, hopefully. Anyone else have a comment on this?
So this is Jeff, and we felt that it was only fair to the owner of the Edgewood to make sure that they could run their season through this year. As far as we hear, the pool will not open. It is the current Ballantine pool will open for this summer season for sure. It will open for this season. We expect to run it through this summer at Ballantine, and then we would, if we were to take possession of Edgewood, we would open up. The town would own and open up in the spring of 2021. As far as
any other? Go ahead.
As far as the is this another reason to ask current seller for extension of the option? We understand that there is a backup offer. I would have to assume if there is a backup offer, it's for more than, not less. And
Jeff, you're garbled. Jeff, you're garbled. Please mouth closer to the speaker.
So we understand that there's a backup offer on the property, and if we could ask for an extension, but if they don't, they're just going to sell to. They would probably put it back on the market or sell to the other offer. So extending the option would be nice, but I don't foresee that.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll go to the next question. What was done to understand the will of the Southbury community? Why is Edgewood the only proposal? From my understanding, people do not want to pay taxes to another municipality. This community has good feelings about Ballantine Pool. Why would the town want to abandon a property it owns? Who wants to tackle this one?
I'll start for a second. What was done to understand the will of the people of Southbury? We looked at the strategic planning task force. They want the quality of life that is positive in Southbury. 2, we've had a pool here for 50 years, and a access to a pool for Southbury residents is something that should continue. That's 2. Why is Edgewood the only proposal? It is the only proposal that has come to our attention of a pool that is a facility that is significantly less in cost in what it would be to replace what we have. Paying taxes to Middlebury. That is a cost of the facility. And I think the Board of Finance isn't concerned whether we pay taxes or insurance or maintenance or electricity. It's a cost. And it is fully covered by all the revenues that the facility generates. Why would the town want to abandon a property it owns? We're not abandoning it. We still own it. We will probably repurpose it somehow, and that hasn't come under consideration. So I think the key of this question is what was done to understand the will of the people. We've got a community. We've got a strategic planning force that wants to also have a community center. That was one of the top 5 priorities. And to Jeff's point, to have a community center, there's no land in Southbury that we could do that. This piece of property, which is half a mile out of town, and is a great platform for the consideration and potential use and expansion as a community center. So, someone else.
Let me chime in a little bit. In terms of understanding the will of the Southbury community, before everything went underground, we had a couple actual at a Board of Finance meeting, and I think a Board of Selectmen meeting, where we got a lot of comment about this. And at those meetings, we got a lot of the pool community coming out, just trying to be reassured that we weren't shutting down, the pool in Southbury altogether. So I think a lot of our response has been to try to find some way to preserve the pool concept in Southbury, given the kind of what it seems like ever rising costs that we see in terms of estimates of what it would take to redo Ballantyne.
One comment that I would make is that by purchasing a property like Edgewood, it's a little different than just spending money. Essentially, you're buying an asset, and that asset will have value in the future. If for some reason we decide we don't want to keep Edgewood and don't want to run it anymore, we could sell it and maybe get our money back, maybe get more than our money back. So it's a different discussion, I think, than just spending $2 million and not getting anything back for it, really. Anyone else have anything they want to say about this?
Let me refocus again on why is Edgewood the only proposal? It certainly is not. We looked very diligently at either repairing or rebuilding our existing facility. That's where we started. And it was, so we certainly have looked at that proposal.
I think it's fair to say if you were to build a new pool on another site other than Ballantyne, the costs would be similar. Hugh, do you have a feeling about that?
To build Edgewood today?
No, to build a pool similar to Edgewood or even Ballantyne on a new site. Let's say you didn't want to use Ballantyne Park, you wanted to build it at Settlers Park or some other place. I think the cost would be about the 3.7 would be about right.
Oh yeah, you're. See, to me, as I've said, you're buying Edgewood for 50 cents on the dollar. I'm just speaking as an architect that understands, when you have to do construction of that magnitude, create that type of ADA accessible swimming pool, a bathhouse and exercise facility structure that's over 5,000 feet, 150 some plus parking spaces, paddle tennis courts. I mean, it's a $4.5 million project.
Hugh, I think the question went to what do you think it would take to rebuild the Ballantyne facility on some other property in Southbury? Would it be close to the 3.7?
It'd be $4 million bucks, easy.
So whether we build on the existing Southbury site or some other site, it's still going to cost us $3.7 million or more to do the pool and an ADA parking lot, bathhouse.
That's correct. Because the first thing you would do is you would create at least you'd have to increase your parking over 100% from what you have now, which you can't do right now at Community House.
Plus, we wouldn't have any demolition costs.
That's correct.
My understanding is that the parking at Ballantyne is currently inadequate. Although I'm not a user of the pool, does anyone have any experience or comment they'd like to share about that?
George, it's Dan. I believe from the research that we have done is that the parking lot isn't ADA compliant to have vans come in, and there's not
That's
enough
correct.
ADA spaces in the parking lot.
Yeah, and I think it's also small. I've heard people parking over in the cemetery area during swim meets when there's a lot of demand.
That's correct.
All right. Any other comments on this question?
I have none.
Okay. How can current town pool lifeguards expect their job to be changed with the new facility? In the first financial overview meeting, it was stated that the number of lifeguards should be reduced. Should some town lifeguards and other pool employees expect to be released from their jobs in upcoming seasons? You want to tackle this part first? Dan, I think you may be the expert on lifeguards at this point.
Yeah, certainly not an expert on lifeguards, but as we looked at this Edgewood facility and spoke to the owner and looked at our needs and addressed what what is required by the state of Connecticut, we realized that we did have an overabundance of lifeguards at Edgewood. So I worked with the director of Park and Rec to put together a schedule that we think makes sense. Also does not reduce the safety of anyone going into the pool. And as far as reducing staff, we may go down, let's say where we had 13 lifeguards on one shift, we may go down to 7 or 8. But that doesn't mean that the jobs are not going to be available for people to apply, and we hope that everyone does, because they are going to be available. It's just the shifts. As far as the shifts go, we may not have 13 lifeguards on every shift. Not to say on the busy times like July 4th and Memorial Day that we will, but when we have 13 lifeguards almost every day, we'll only have between 5 and 8. So fiscally, we thought it was important to take a closer look at every aspect of our budget this year. And that was just one of the areas that we looked at that we thought that we could get a little bit of savings without compromising the safety of the people of the town.
So, hey, Dan, let me chime in there a little bit, because I thought maybe one thing you said was a little bit misspoke, was that I think that the issue with the lifeguards is kind of independent of Ballantyne versus Edgewood, right? In the sense that the changes we're making are going to impact Ballantyne this year, and I don't think they're too much different. Once we make the changes in terms of what we're doing to Ballantyne, we're pretty much, it's not the Edgewood Ballantyne choice, which is the issue on the lifeguards, really.
You're correct, Tom. What the changes that we'd make in Ballantyne this year will be the exact process that we'd implement in Edgewood next year.
Dan, who actually sets the safety codes or regulations regarding how many lifeguards you need per how many people in the pool?
It's the American Red Cross in the state of Connecticut also has guidelines, George.
So your new staffing setup would meet those requirements?
They would, yes.
Any other comments on this? Okay, I'll go to the second part of this. Reducing the number of guards working at a pool or implementing a more demanding guard rotation like Edgewood has now considerably increases workload on the employees. Can town lifeguards expect an increase in compensation if less guards are employed or a more demanding guard rotation is enacted? Dan, I guess you'd be the one to answer that unless someone else has something they'd like to say.
When we spoke to the current owner of Edgewood, and she was giving us her schedule for guards, which is very similar to the schedule that we're going to enact at Ballantyne. She didn't feel that the guards had any issue with the rotation staff, and the rotation would simply be 45 minutes on the chair and 15 minutes every hour for a break, and they would rotate every 15 minutes. So she didn't feel, in her experience of 10 years of running the club, that there was any issues with a demand or more demand than what we do at Edgewood on the rotation of her guards.
And I think she was paying her guards less than we were paying ours. Is that true?
That's true. And we would not reduce the salary of our guards to what she's paying, we would continue the same platform that we do now.
Okay. Any other comments there?
And just for clarity, Dan, there is no difference on, there is no difference between a town-run pool and a private-run pool in terms of requirements in that regard. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tom.
With the coronavirus, stock market uncertainty, stay-in-place orders in the area, real estate values will surely be dropping due to job security and unemployment concerns. Suggest a reconsideration as to offering price based on world situation now. That's a tough question. Anybody have a thought they'd like to share?
Well, this is Dan, George. I think as I read the question, I'm not so sure that we entered into an agreement with Edgewood to purchase the property at the price that was listed at, actually less than list price, but we haven't agreed upon price. So for us to come back and suggest a reconsideration, we wouldn't be honoring the contract that we have with the owners of Edgewood.
Yeah, I suspect the deal would fall apart at that point.
And this goes back to the fact that we have the understanding that there's a backup offer on the property. So if we don't go with the property, try to renegotiate a price, I don't see the owner doing that because there is a supposed backup offer on that.
Yes, and from what I understand about her motivation is that she really she wants to get at her timing. She doesn't want to wait a long time to get through this process, right?
That's correct, Tom. And we met with the owner just I think 2 weeks ago, and there's some family stuff that's going on right now that she probably wants to get a deal done, but she also is willing to work with the town as far as her consulting with us as we move forward to run the facility. But yeah, I don't know how long of a wait that she has to put off. If we extend the option, she would most likely turn us down and go with the other offer.
She's also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
As far as the negotiation goes, we need to be tough here. But certainly, whether or not in good faith, we should try to take advantage of market uncertainty and what the question goes to. That's what I guess you call a sharp practice, trying to take unfair advantage, or maybe it's fair in a real estate market. I don't want to think about that personally. I think what we need to realize a couple of things. One, we're buying this property for less than half its current book value. Two, we're buying this property for more, maybe a third of what it would cost to rebuild it. We're buying this property for almost half of what it would take for us to do an alternative. We're buying this property not for what they originally asked for it, but what Dan was able to get. I think it was a $200,000 or $100,000 deduct after he negotiated it. So I think we beat him up pretty good, and the town is getting a excellent value. The fact that over the next 3, 6, 9 months, the real estate market, the world, everything is in crisis. I feel uncomfortable about trying to take advantage of that, especially since it's not likely we can, because there are other options. The seller has other offers available. Thank you.
This is Jeff, and I want to also say that if you're trying to time this and work this, I do know we've been having a number of in our town clerk's office, a number of closings that are being booked in. As soon as this situation with the coronavirus settles, I anticipate with what the interest rates are, a significant activity in the real estate market. Because people are going to realize as they go back to work, that we're through it and it could see an uptick. So I think that's a dangerous game to play at this point. We did negotiate pretty hard. I think I negotiated about as hard as I dare without getting an outright refusal. And I want to be clear that though they want to sell the asset, I want to be clear that when you look at the financials, they don't have to sell the asset.
The owners have offered to, at least verbally, do the repair work suggested by the building inspector at their cost. I have a feeling if we start renegotiating this deal, things like that, and the goodwill we have with the owners about helping us manage the facility in the first year, I think all that will evaporate. I look at this as it's a 50-year or 40-year investment. I'm trying not to look at the short term because it's so nasty right now. You know, looking at my 401ks, you know, it's a depressing thing. But this will pass. We've seen worse things in our country's history, and a year from now, things are going to be very different. And I'm not thinking about the short term. I'm thinking this is a long-term investment. Any other comments here? Or? All right, go to the next question. In light of the comments expressed in the email and attachment, does it make sense to spend $2 million during a national crisis with an uncertain financial future, both for the town, state, and country? Is this fiscally conservative and a real priority worthy of $2 million expenditure at this time, when another option, Newtown Community Center, is already available at no cost to the town? I will say the Newtown Community Center is an indoor pool. I don't think an indoor pool is really what people are looking for in the summertime. I know as a kid, I don't think I would have been going to an indoor pool in the summer. And Newtown Community Center, frankly, doesn't have the options, the tennis courts and the paddle tennis and, you know, the pool house thing is very different at Edgewood. It's not comparing apples to apples. And as I said before, I don't look at this as a one-year investment. This is a 40-year investment. I know we're in a crisis, but I think we need to look beyond that and look to the future and do the right thing. If we let this deal slide, I don't know that it'll be there. And then what? Then we're spending $4 million. Frankly, if we were going to spend $4 million to rebuild Ballantyne as a selectman, I don't think I would vote for that. I would say, no, we're just going to not have a pool. I can go with 2, but for 4, I don't know. It's, to me, not worth it. Anyone else want to say anything about that?
Well, I guess I'd like to chime in. And how real is the Newtown opportunity for like 200, say, families from Southbury? I mean, what is the cost of the Newtown opportunity for like 200 cost? Do we have any sense of that? I mean, is the Newtown opportunity really an opportunity for a lot of people from Southbury?
Hey, Tom, it's Tom. I've worked closely with the director of the Newtown facility, both on the Strategic Plan Commission. We've actually done a tour of that facility, and it's a beautiful facility. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, that and the senior center, it's a beautiful thing that they've built there in town. At a big cost, at a big price tag, but it's a beautiful facility. It is open to Southbury residents. It has been in operation for about a year, maybe not quite a year yet, and that remains an option. I know a couple families in town that are members there. If you live in the purchase area of town, it's probably a closer option than Ballantyne for you, perhaps. But I would say everything that was said previously about it being an indoor facility. I've also asked that director how many Southbury residents are currently taking advantage of it. And while he couldn't pull me the exact number, he said there's a handful of families. and they do have more seniors that are active in the senior center that are also members of the pool there. So the fact that that's already been an option that's available to residents, and we haven't seen widespread adoption, makes me think that it's not a panacea for what we're looking at. But it is certainly an option, and if you're curious, I invite you to check it out. It is a great facility.
Well, also, I guess I'm asking, what's the cost? You know, like if you were going to offer that as an option to a Southbury resident, what's the kind of relative cost for that? Does anybody know?
I think it's like $45 a month for a family. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be far off from what we would seek as a family fee at Edgewood. I would call the two comparable. What we'd be looking to do at Edgewood.
This is Jeff, and what I'd like to point out, if you look at our town on the demographics and where the concentration is of our population, the more rural population is towards the Newtown side. So for the majority of the population in Southbury, it would be a lot further of a physical drive to Newtown to access the community center. If you look on the map and where most of the homes in Southbury are concentrated, it is actually to that side, the Edgewood side of our town, compared to the Newtown side of our town. So that would be a consideration for a lot of people about how much further the majority of the people would have to drive to access the Newtown Community Center.
George, if I might for a second, I'd like to go back to the first paragraph because the question is a very interesting one. Should we be spending money during a national crisis? I think I would, as I look at that question, I'd sort of turn it around and say, as public officials, should we fail to continue to plan for the future in spite of the fact that there is a current turmoil that will certainly last for another 2, 3, 4 months, maybe even 9 or even a year? We're talking about 30, 40 years down the road. There is going to be a town of Southbury 10, 20, 30 years from now. And as elected officials, we're looking at our responsibility to take care of the recreational needs of our young families and on older people. And to answer the first question, I'd turn it around and I'd say we have an obligation, in spite of the national crisis, to pay attention to our future. We're not going to fail to build our roads. We're not going to fail to replace our fire trucks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I would look at the first sentence.
We're facing a crisis at Ballantyne Park with the pool, and this is a better, cheaper solution by far than rebuilding the Ballantyne pool. So I think it's prudent of us to do the right thing. I mean, the other option is just to not have a pool, and I don't think that's the right choice for this town. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think, to that point, I think we made that point in the presentation, is that there's a lot of tradition in this town based around, around the pool, that I personally know a lot of kids, that at least 2 or 3 kids, for instance, that got into Ivy League schools because of their swimming prowess here. And so I feel like, the pool has been kind of a big tradition in this town to some degree. And that's the sense we got from that's the sense we got, I think, before everything got closed down, and some of those initial meetings where a lot of the pool advocates came out. And so I guess the real issue about the Newtown choice is that, that really sort of gives up the idea of having a town pool, really.
I'll say something I said earlier, and I don't really view this as an expenditure so much as an acquisition. We're buying a piece of property, so we're converting cash into real estate. We still have an asset on the books. I think crisis or no crisis, I think this is a prudent decision for the town. Okay, does the town selectmen have any
Wait,
concerns?
hey, George, one more thing about that, right?
Go ahead.
I don't know. Again, we haven't thought too much about this, but it probably does something for the real estate value of the town to have the pool, does it not? I mean, for all of us, just besides the value of it, I feel like I don't know. We haven't investigated that too much, but I feel like that maintaining the pool adds some value to the town, real estate. Maybe not much, but it's a kind of, I think it's an important consideration, just even for non-pool users.
I'm sure it has a upward force on real estate values in town to have a nice community center or a pool like this. What that amount is, I don't know if anyone could really figure it out, but that's a good point. Does the town selectmen have any concerns with proposed facility being so far outside of Southbury Town proper center? Would this facility be open to Middlebury residents also? Well, why don't we take it as two questions? I mean, it's, I think, 0.6 miles outside of the border, and it's right next to one of our elementary schools, Longmeadow, and quarter in the high school. So again, like I was saying, we're already regionalized with Middlebury in so many ways. 70% or 67% of our property taxes go to the schools, go to Region 15. So, I mean, you could make a case to somehow merge Southbury and Middlebury. I mean, we're already like that. I'm not suggesting we do that, but I don't really see it as being that far outside of Southbury, and I don't think it's an inappropriate location. As been said before, it's actually in a near perfect location if you wanted to have a regional community center with, Woodbury and Oxford. It's like at the intersection of all four towns. It's actually a pretty damn good location. Pardon my French. Anyone else have a thought on that?
This is Jeff, and I would say yes. In the beginning, that's why in the beginning, when we had heard about the Edgewood, I had heard about it, other people had, but it really wasn't a consideration until we saw the cost come in. Once we saw I saw the cost coming in, I realized I needed to make a drive out there, look at the location, and at least explore this option. Then I looked at the location with all the other towns, the fact that, we've been looking for the centralized regional piece of property and the beginnings of this. So, yes, I mean, it was originally a concern, but then when you started adding the fact that a lot of our Southbury children go to school at Longmeadow and to the high school, and how much our Pomperog tennis team uses this, it became not as big a concern that it was a 0.6 of a mile. And I also looked at, the drive on the highway for people who are further away, and it kind of fit in pretty well. As far as would this facility be open to Middlebury residents, we already open up our pool facility to people from out of town. There's a different rate for people from out of town. So I look at this facility as if we have the capacity to accept people from other municipalities. I don't see why we wouldn't offer up to Middlebury residents. And to be honest with you, if there were people from Woodbury that would like to belong, and if there's people from Oxford that would like to belong, I think we would be open to that once we knew what capacity was comfortable for us.
And Jeff, this is Dan. In our financial model, we do have two membership tiers. One for Southbury residents, which is very similar to what we're charging for Valentine Park right now, and one for non-Southbury residents.
you're not getting across the sound real good there.
Sorry, George. I'll say it again. In our financial model, we put together a two-tier kind of membership, one for Southbury residents, which would be very similar to the current price that we're paying in for Ballantyne Park right now. And the second tier membership would be open to members of the community that are outside of Southbury.
This next question, will the meeting agenda cover the next steps, future plans for the existing pool at Ballantyne?
Sorry, I had my mic muted.
That's okay, George. Do you want me to continue on that, or do you want to give that?
Yeah, why don't you keep going if you've got it.
So our primary concern here was the escalating cost of the pool facility at Ballantyne and how to deal with that. There was a lot of talk thrown around about what could be done with Ballantyne pool facility if we decided to go with Edgewood and not Ballantyne. So I think that's still up for discussion of what the future needs would be there. Everything has been thrown out about, well, you could use the current pool hole that's there. Sometimes they convert them to skateboard parks. The good thing is that they're secure. There's a fence around it and it's secure. And it would give us time, as in future, we could decide what would the town be, what would the people of town be looking for, what that might cost to say if we were to look at a skateboard park, and if that's still a popular thing with young people, or do we want to fill it in and create something else there? So the next step, certainly, once we decide on which way the town wants to go, if they want to go in the direction of Edgewood, certainly we would start exploring with Parks and Rec what their vision of future usage of that particular area that the pool currently exists. So that I think is what would happen after that. We wouldn't just walk away and say, well, let the brush grow up, let it sit there. We'll figure this out some other day. We certainly would come up with a vision for what to do with that area.
The only thing that, as a group, we've talked about with Ballantyne, if we were to shut it down, is just closing it up safely and making sure it's a safe, secure facility after it's shut down. We haven't really discussed too much about the future of that facility. That's a different project, and a different focus than just what we do with Edgewood. From my understanding, it wouldn't be difficult to close the pool at Ballantyne and make it safe. Is that true, Jeff?
Yeah, the whole pool is fenced in, and it has to be made safe as it is because there's water. So we have to have, the chain link fence. There's a specification for that. So it's currently secure. It's locked. People should not go in there because of the fence meets the proper code. So it would be secure. If we just emptied the water out of it and it was already secure, we would just leave everything locked until we came up with a plan of what the town might want to do that going forward. So there's no issue that has to be taken care of from a security or safety standpoint because it's already secure and safe. It has to be.
And there's not a lot of cost in securing it. It's almost secure as is now in the wintertime. So it's not like you have to spend $100,000 to secure it.
You don't have to spend anything. You wouldn't have to because it's a chain link fence. It's secured. You have to maintain a pool with a secure fence around it. It's a regulation. So then you can just, if you just drain the water out of it, It would just be a hole in the ground that's secured, fence around it. It wouldn't cost other than draining it.
So you can leave it as a hole in the ground with a fence around it, and that's okay?
Again, it is secure the way it is right now. It has to be secured because it's a swimming pool. It has to be secured so people can't drown in it, and they can't get into it when it's not staffed. It is secured now.
Okay, sorry, I won't beat that dead horse anymore. But I was going to ask Hugh a question, just out of curiosity, Hugh. What experience have you seen or done with abandoned swimming pools? What do people do with them? What do towns do with them? And this must have happened in other towns. What do they do with the space or the structure?
Some towns will, demolish them and fill them right in because they're considered an attractive nuisance. And some, private ownership, they'll even coordinate it with their insurance companies.
Okay, let's move on with the questions.
All right. Why are we buying a pool in another town when less than 1% of town residents use the town pool? Why don't we answer that question, since this question has like 3 or 4 parts. I can't read the whole thing right now, but yeah. Why are we buying a town? Go ahead.
I'm not so sure the less than 1% is accurate. Well, certainly we only have 110, I think, season memberships. There are 1,000 day passes, and so I don't know how many individuals are passes. I'm sure they're duplicates, but there are hundreds, literally hundreds of residents who use the pool. It's certainly not less than 200.
There's also swim teams involved that aren't considered, they don't pay for memberships. Does anybody have a idea how many people are involved with the swim teams that use that pool?
I don't have that. I have that number, George. I just don't have it handy. I could have it available for Monday night.
Okay.
And there's also swim lessons that's not included in the number.
Dan, you got to talk closer to the microphone. You get garbled.
Sorry, John. I do have the number of swim team members and swim lessons. I don't have it available right now, but I can have it for our Monday night meeting.
There's also camp. Sorry, Jeff. There's also summer camp. So there's summer camp, there's swim team, there's swim lessons, there's day passes, there's family passes. I don't think we have an accurate head count on the percentage of residents, but it's certainly higher than 1%.
And aren't there also swim meets where other towns come in and use the pool, kids from other towns?
Hey, George, it's Dan. I believe that's correct.
Yes, that's definitely true.
So, yeah, I think the 1% number is a little misleading.
So if I could tie this up a little bit with a second question, how will the town manage membership if it exceeds capacity? It kind of, the first question is, we're not at capacity of the first pool of Ballantyne. How will the town manage memberships if it exceeds capacity? The capacity of the pool is substantial. I don't know the exact number of people. If we were to meet the capacity of the school of the pool, we will be celebrating because it will offset the cost of certainly what it is to run it. Our hope is that with the zero, if we were to buy the Edgewood, the zero entry would be attractive to a lot more people, especially with our seniors and senior centers. Already our director of senior services is quite interested and very enthusiastic that this could become part of our senior center offering. And I mean, not that all our seniors are, in walkers. Many of us resemble being seniors now. So we're hoping that increases the use of the pool. On the flip side, of membership is lower than projected, I think Dan can tell you that the projections that were made were extremely conservative on those estimates. I'll let Dan talk about that.
Yeah, Jeff. What we had done when we put together the fiscal analysis, we ended up erring on the side.
Dan, you got to get into that microphone. Sorry, man.
Sorry about that, George. Is this better?
That's
Yes.
much better.
Okay, so when we put together the fiscal analysis for the Edgewood facility, we did use a conservative number just based upon not only the amount of people that are going to be joining, but for people that may be leaving the facility based upon the fact that a municipality is purchasing it. So I think our numbers are our break-even numbers are considerably low. We have a break-even analysis of about 400 members.
And to the
Said any? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Whoever's talking.
This is Jeff, and on the end of that, will taxes be increased? I think John Michaels, you can answer that as the chair of the Board of Finance on the fact that this is not going to increase taxes.
In fact, if no one shows up at the pool, it will cost
John, are
us
you there?
money.
If
John Michaels, go ahead.
Unmute. Can you hear me now? I feel like
yes,
a commercial.
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Certainly. If the membership is lower than projected, we will not do this saving money. We maybe go back to costing the town $90,000 like it does now. We have to admit that, because the question is, if it's too low, what'll happen? Well, if it's too low, we might increase taxes back to where they are now to support a pool. The question is, what is the probability that the membership will be too low? I think the committee feels it is extremely unlikely. What we are doing is we are lowering the cost for membership into Edgewood, which is a fabulous facility, which we are committed to maintain in its existing quality within the budget. We are lowering the cost from $1,100 a year to $800 a year for non-Southbury residents. So we are making this significantly more attractive. So we have to admit, if you don't get the membership, we might have to increase taxes. What is that probability? Extremely low. Extremely low. The worst problem would be that we have too many members, and we have to increase the cost of membership, and then we'll make more money, which will go into keeping the facility up.
John, this is Jeff, and maybe you can answer this question. If we were not to go on to, if we decided not to go with the Edgewood, and given the numbers we are seeing for the cost of building the pool at Ballantyne and the bathhouse that would have to go with it, is it reasonable to say that by doing that, it would surely cost the taxpayers an increase in taxes?
Absolutely. If you're going to spend $3.7 million, even after we take the $200,000, Dan has this number, I think. Even if we take the $200,000 in cash and apply it towards the 3.7, we're still going to have to borrow $1.7 million to fund this. And then if you over 20 years with interest, that average cost is, gosh, Dan, it's on a sheet of paper someplace. I think it's $100,000. So you're going to end up with just $100,000 alone in debt service. Plus, you've got the $90,000 it now costs because we don't have extra revenue streams to lower the net cost to the town. So you'd probably at least double the current cost of $90,000 if we don't go to Edgewood, if we rebuild.
Yeah, John, this is Dan. Our estimated debt servicing was $130,000.
A year on average.
Yes.
More in the beginning. So it's 130 plus 90 is $220,000. So you very definitely would increase taxes by having to borrow to pay for a significant portion of a rebuild.
Let's go back to the question of what we do if membership exceeds capacity. I think if we had to exclude people, the first people to be excluded would be the out-of-towners. Is that a fair statement?
I would say yes. This facility certainly would the citizens of the town of Southbury would be the primary consideration of membership. But I don't know what I don't have it at my fingertips, the total capacity of Edgewood versus Ballantyne, but I think it's quite a bit more than Ballantyne. So I don't really foresee the possibility, I really don't foresee membership exceeding the capacity. Also understand that at any given time, you can have more membership than what the pool will allow in. That doesn't mean, let's just say you had 4,000 members. Not 4,000 members would be in the pool at the same time. So you would the number of people who can be allowed inside the pool area is a certain number. So just because you have all those memberships does not necessarily mean you meet the capacity of the pool itself. So they would be using maybe someone goes swimming on a Tuesday, someone goes swimming on a Saturday. If it gets to the point where there's too many people in the pool facility because some members will be using the tennis courts, some will be using the playground, you may have a situation where you tell people that you have to rotate.
Jeff, you're breaking up. Jeff, you're breaking up. Closer to the mic, please.
So, well, I guess if the capacity of the pool, membership-wise, it may outstrip the physical capacity of people being in the pool. But if the number of swimmers in the pool exceeded, they would just rotate, like every half hour or every 20 minutes they'd have to come in and out. But I highly doubt that will happen.
We addressed the capacity issue, and if I remember correctly, we were told, it was either Susie or Jeff or someone, we were told that except for July 4th weekend, their current membership rolls leave plenty of space. There's plenty of capacity. And our model did not increase. Dan, you'd have to remind me. I don't think there was a significant increase in the number of memberships in the model going forward. So I guess the question is, if we exceed capacity, we'd probably have to either raise the fees or tell out-of-towners they can't come. I think also we need to realize that if we exceed capacity in the pool, there's still extra revenue to be gotten from capacity using the courts. So it's a very interesting, complicated question. And there's no real answer at this point.
Okay.
To members of the task force, my family and I belong to Edgewood for 6 summers, and I have much information to share about the facility and your efforts to push through purchasing a recreational facility outside town borders in the middle of a global health pandemic. Well, is that a question or an answer?
That's not a...
We've already addressed that. let's go on. We've already addressed it.
All right, the state
No
of
prior
Connecticut extended all deadlines, and so from today, the town has a full 90 days in which to complete the budget. That affords us the time and ability to honor democratic norms by giving the public a full opportunity to be heard, particularly on this very controversial plan. I would be interested to understand why the Manville administration, it's always Jeff's fault, is in such a hurry to rush the review, particularly while we are all confined in quarantine at home, unable to participate. This is contrary to the interests of a small town like ours. We claim to be run by volunteers, and therefore the opinions of our citizens should matter. I guess that's a question. Anybody want to tackle that one? Don't all talk at once.
This is Jeff. As far as this goes, we were hoping to have informational meetings under a normal operation. We were going to have informational meetings like this in town to discuss this, and we are on we have an option. The option runs out at a certain time, so we have a defined time to either consider this or reject it. And so it's a tight deadline. Originally, the owners said they would give a 90-day option, and I asked for 120, and they were amenable to that. They were okay with that. They understood that the governmental process takes time, longer than normal private industry. So first, I don't think this is being rushed. It's a matter of getting the information out to the public through a number of informational meetings and getting questions asked. So I don't think it's my administration that is trying to rush this through. It's a timeline we have to deal with. And unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, it makes it difficult to get things done.
Well, the governor has offered us the ability to pass our budgets without going to referendums, which, I'm not real happy about that, but that's the situation we're in right now. Is it's a very dangerous thing to do, to have a referendum where a lot of people come together into a closed area and in close contact with each other. So I think we got to be mindful of that risk and figure out how to make these kinds of decisions in other ways. As Jeff has mentioned, there is a time constraint on this. We don't have forever to make this decision. So anyone else want to have a point they want to make on that?
Yeah, this is Dan, and I would agree with Jeff on that. We started this process several months ago, so I don't feel that we're rushing through the process at all in any way. Ideally, would we have liked to have had open public meetings? Yes, but unfortunately, with the situation right now, that became impossible. But we started this process several months ago, so I don't feel that we're rushing anything along.
I would agree with that. We've taken a lot of time to do our research and come to our conclusions, and I don't feel rushed. I think we worked hard, and there wasn't any rush about it. Anyone else have something they'd like to say about that?
Yeah, well, I think the financial arguments, I guess the real question is do we, the financial arguments we made sort of give you a sense that the Edgewood choice financially is a better choice than the Valentine choice, right? So from the standpoint of being, if we agree we need a pool in where we want a pool in Southbury, then I think the Edgewood choice is the better financial choice. So all the allusion to doing something irresponsible in the financial crisis, I think is a little bit of a red herring of sorts, in the sense that I think we've argued that the financial, I guess if you think that the choice just not to have a pool is our out, if things go really badly, then maybe I guess that's a choice. But I think we've tried to argue that the Edgewood choice is financially the better choice than trying to maintain Ballantyne.
Can we scroll down to the regarding the facility and property? Up the edge, right?
I was gonna do the next two real quick.
Go ahead, John.
Let's do the second one. The Finance Committee review all revenue calculations. The revenue calculations for the town have been developed in depth in the last 30 days. So we were just at the beginning of this whole Corona thing. And I know Dan has been working on it. I've been working on it as chairman with Dan over the phone. And we've scrubbed those calculations. Tom has been involved over the phone working on them. So we have a very timely review of our revenues. Dan is in constant contact with the state concerning the likelihood of anything different coming in on state funding. We've had no indicate that it might be a problem. Also, I think Tom and Dan have looked at what happens in a financial crisis to our tax collections. And we found in the year of the crisis, they're really not changed, but there is a very, very, very modest tail in a couple of years following a crisis, as the question relates to unemployment and foreclosures, et cetera, but not so much to cause any significant at all change in our collections. We did the whole notion of buying a pool during the coronavirus. We addressed that question previously. So maybe we can go on to the one Jeff wants to do regarding the next one, space facilities.
Let's clarify that a paragraph about the coronavirus and a pool. This, assuming there's a swim season, the upcoming summer swim season would be at Ballantyne, regardless of when this, if this is approved, regardless of when we take hold of it. It would be the 2021 swim season at Edgewood that we'd be talking about. So 2020 will remain Ballantyne, assuming we're allowed to.
Regarding the facility and property, there are space problems at Edgewood's main attraction, its pool. There is little room to move around at the pool because the cement wrap around deck is rather small. There's a bottleneck problem at the entrance. The bathrooms have ventilation problems. They are small and underground with no windows. The club is running machines 24 hours a day to try to control odor and environmental problems there. The club owner once said she regretted the bathroom design. Those are issues I have not heard about before. They certainly bear looking into. Anyone have a thought on that?
You had, this is Hugh Sullivan. I've never heard of those before either. You said you had someone do an inspection? Did that come up in your inspection?
This is Dan, and it did not. And the inspection report is on the link if anyone wants to look at it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well,
Regarding decking, it was mentioned in the presentation, but the decking at Edgewood is about 2.5 times the available square footage that we currently have at Ballantyne, and that stuff's not cheap. That's market rate $250,000 up in concrete alone. So the decking is actually a plus compared to Ballantyne.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say as well, Tom. And not only the decking, I think the bathhouse is definitely a plus compared to Ballantyne. So in comparison to Ballantyne, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't comparing it to anything else, but in comparison to Ballantyne, it seems to be a better deal, right?
I think we should at least ask the owners of Edgewood about the need to run machines and find out what that's all about, and if there's an odor issue. I don't know how you could remediate that, but we should at least check it out, find out a little more about that issue, if it's real or not.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is Jeff. It's interesting on this comment. that my family and I belong to Edgewood for 6 summers. I'm questioning, if you remember, for 6 summers, how bad was it?
That's a good point. Are there any more questions in this? The majority of Southbury residents is known to prefer a year-round community center. I've heard the owner and task force members casually mention that there's plenty of room for expansion at Edgewood. Is there room? There's barely enough space for cars, especially on busy holidays, and the facility appears surrounded by wetlands. And why would we build in Middlebury unless Middlebury wanted to make this a joint endeavor? Well, there's a lot of questions in there, and anybody want to start unpacking it?
I'll start. The majority of Southbury residents is known to prefer a year-round facility. That's the first declaration I've heard of that. I'm sure there are some. Well, I have never heard that a majority want that. I've heard of the owners, there's plenty of room for expansion. What we've said is there is room for expansion. There is. Whether or not you would have to get more parking on an adjacent space, I don't know. But we've said this is a opportunity for expansion, period. There are barely enough space for cars, especially on busy holidays. On July 4th, no place in the United States is built for enough parking. So I don't know that that's a fair standard by which to judge parking. I think zoning doesn't require the maximum that ever could happen any one day. This facility is surrounded by wetlands, yes. Some of it is, okay. And why would we build in Middlebury unless Middlebury wants to make it a joint endeavor? We're buying in Middlebury because it is in our region. It's a half a mile from the Southbury line. It costs half what it costs to rebuild the pool in Southbury. It does offer an opportunity for a regional community center. So, and unless Middlebury wants to join in this endeavor, Jeff has said, I heard him say he wants to consider Middlebury as a partner, but not until we can figure out, get our hands on it and be in charge of creating a partnership. So first shot.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I would add that, referring back to the presentation earlier, our recommendation contains a condition that asks that this task force remain in place to investigate that very issue, or both of those issues, the issue of a community center and the issue of a possible expansion. When this task force was formed by Jeff, that was not one of our original tasks to take a look at. Time being of the essence, and we've had 6 weeks. The majority of our due diligence has been on evaluating the two properties. However, the task force realizes that these are both critical issues, and we would like more time to review them. However, they are bonuses in the opinion of this task force. I don't think they are critical in our recommendation.
Yes, I agree with that, but two more comments on that. One is I don't think it's surrounded by wetlands. In other words, I do think that there is space that could be purchased adjacent to it that's usable. The second point is that the parking is certainly better than Valentine.
So this is Jeff on the wade-in splash park concept. That's a standard in the industry today. We do have a kiddie pool at the current Ballantyne Park. The capacity of the filtration systems through the state of Connecticut's approval is always matched to these particular to pools. That's one of the considerations. This conclusion that about that in the conclusion part of this. And we talk about financial stability. I've, of course, have been a resident all my life in Southbury, and I would match the financial stability of the town of Southbury from when it was started to now to be second to none of the other towns. We are financially stable. We have John Michaels can speak to the amount of debt we carry, which is very insignificant. So I think from a financial standpoint, this town will continue to operate in a good manner. One of the things we've done, we've been able, because our roads are so good, we've been able to actually reduce the amount of money going into our road budget. I don't know if any other town in the state of Connecticut has been able to achieve that.
You know, I think one of the questions or comments I would make is, as we said many times already in this presentation, the option to fix Ballantine costs a lot more than it does to buy Edgewood. So the financially prudent decision is to go in the direction of Edgewood and not spend a lot more money on Ballantine. All right, this seems like a well thought out solution, and I support this decision. The town needs a pool for the cited reasons, and the location is a practical one. Buying this property for the town is an opportunity that should not be allowed to pass. I congratulate the team for a careful and well thought out presentation and proposal. So I don't see a question in there, but I like the comment. It's nice. Thank you, whoever wrote it.
Dan, how are we doing on attendance? Is anyone still listening to us? And for how much longer do we want to be doing this tonight?
I think, John, we had about a 50% reduction, so maybe we do 1-2 more questions, and then we'll pick up the rest on Monday.
That's certainly up to George, but if we're losing people because it's getting late,
I think we should close it down now. I think it's almost 9:30, and if we're losing people, why are we talking to ourselves? I mean, it's...
Yeah, also, we're doing it all again. We're doing it all again in like 5 or 6 days, right? So if you want to, and we can try to address all the questions in the meantime and address them then, can't we?
Yep.
Yeah. I would think it. I mean, I'm getting pretty tired. I know everybody else probably feels the same way. It's 9:30. Been at this for almost 2.5 hours, so I'm okay with just calling it a night and picking it up on the 6th.
So this is Jeff. So what we're going to do here is we have these questions in the queue. We will formulate the answers so they can be put up on the website so people can see, during the week that we get these questions answered and any other questions that may come in from the public so that we can have these answers in place. Because I'm sure that the questions that are coming up are questions that other people may be sitting at home wondering the same thing, but have not taken the time to actually ask the question through this. So I think we can continue to answer these, put them up on the website, and go into the next meeting with those same, with more questions.
So we pick it up on the 6th.
Yes, what I'm saying is we're not going to just stop answering these questions until the 6th. We will formulate. We have the questions. We're now seeing them. We can work with them, formulate the answers, post the answers next to the questions, and put it up on the website for everybody to go through and see.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Hey, is there anything we can do to make certain we have good audio next time? No, is it a device we need, or what is that we need?
I think a lot of this has to do with the position of the mics back in just the connection. So
Okay.
we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Give people headsets.
I'm wearing a headset now. It helps.
That may
Yeah,
be
you're
the,
coming in fine. I think we got to get Dan a headset.
We'll work on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Dan, you have something?
The only thing I would submit is that if anyone has a question, this isn't the end of asking the question, so please keep submitting them through the
Correct.
webpage, and we will answer them as
right.
as best as we can.
That's right.
Good.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, and thank
All right,
everybody
take
for
care.
hanging in there.